There are easy reptiles, there are difficult reptiles, and then there's a bunch of reptiles, no matter how talented you are, you will never keep successfully. So today, let's go over the top 5 impossible to keep reptiles. My name's Adam, this is Diamond, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. To be clear, I'm not taking the word impossible lightly. All of these reptiles are ones that in a private collection, you will probably not be able to keep successfully, to have a thriving animal that'll live for any amount of time at all, really. And let's just start off with the most obvious, in my opinion, number 5, Komodo dragons. The largest of any species of lizard on the planet that currently exists. Sure, crocodile monitors can get a little bit longer, but in terms of overall size, Komodos are king. Now this is a protected species. They are from Indonesia, the Isles of Komodo, which is actually a national park now. So you can't take them out of Komodo, although you will see unsuccessful attempts and hopefully no successful ones, because these guys on the black market can go for $35,000 US. That's a lot of money. It's enough money to change your life if you're one of the poachers. But also you go to jail for basically ever if you are caught. So the reason you don't see these in private collections, besides the fact that they are nearly impossible to keep in captivity, is because it is super duper illegal. And even if you could get one in your private collection, even if you had the most cool Camp Cannon-esque type of environment that you could make a zoo at your house, you probably still wouldn't be successful. Komodo dragons, we started keeping them in captivity, the very first ones in the London Zoo in 1927, and they didn't last long. And then a few years later in the United States, in the Zoo of Washington, same thing, didn't really last that long. Just simply because it's hard to keep them in captivity. Sure, it's easy to feed them, but they are very prone to infections, and to parasitic disease as well. So unless you have a full-time vet on your super private, nobody knows about it, otherwise you're going to go to jail forever ranch, then you're going to have dead Komodo dragons, and what's the point anyway? I guess everything on this list is going to be impossible to keep unless you have Tony Stark type resources, and this is another reason why Komodo dragons aren't for basically anybody. It is so expensive to keep them, the area they need is ridiculous. The amount of money required to house these things would be, you wouldn't, like, it's impossible for normal people to wrap their heads around it. And sure, there are the Joe Exotics of the world.
Carol Baskin, and Carol Baskin.
But it would probably cost more money to keep one Komodo dragon than dozens of those tigers. So I don't really know why I'm like hammering this home. You're not going to get a Komodo dragon, right? Don't get a Komodo dragon. But if you want to see them, there are about 54 of them in captivity around the world, so feel free to visit a zoo. They're amazing animals and they deserve to be seen, but from afar. All right, let's move on to number 4, sea snakes. Now, not all sea snakes are impossible to keep in captivity. There are 69 different species. Almost all of them are highly venomous, but there are certain ones that just, there's no way, and there's never been a documented case of keeping them in captivity successfully. There are some that, because of their diet and they're just kind of they're like the leopard geckos of sea snakes as far as sea snakes go, where it's nearly impossible not to have them thrive as long as you put in the bare minimum amount of work. But most sea snakes don't do well at all. Most of them, they need an environment, the type of habitat that is almost impossible to recreate. They are saltwater species most of the time. They need lots of area. We're talking about kilometers of area or square miles of area most of the time for them to feel happy and be able to breed for sure. And that's the reason that a lot of these aren't kept in captivity. Even the ones that do okay is just simply because even if you can keep them, breeding them is next to impossible. And even if you can find one, usually these guys don't handling, they don't tolerate handling, and don't tolerate being out of water for long enough to even transport them appropriately. So just in general, even if you could get your hands on one, most of the time it's illegal, but even if you could get your hands on one, the ability to set it up an aquarium that would have these guys thrive or even survive is next to impossible. And for someone who doesn't have all the resources and doesn't have a, say, government-run aquarium or government-funded aquarium with all that money and all that time and vets and biologists and things like that to help you out, you're going to be unsuccessful. You're just going to have dead, expensive snakes. Number 3, and maybe the most weirdly adapted reptile on the planet, marine iguanas. And yes, I did cover these guys in the master level list I did several months back. You can watch it right here. I regret putting them on that list because they're not a master level species. They're an impossible species because nobody can keep these in captivity for longer than a few years. And yes, we did see a zoo in the US care for these guys for 6 years before they died, but 6 years isn't a long time. These guys can live for decades, so it's almost impossible to have these guys for more than a few weeks, never mind a few days. And yes, there is an illegal market for them. It is very illegal to own one in captivity, although I've seen on Facebook groups with people's real faces on their Instagram account where they posted it, these animals in their care, in 40-gallon enclosures. I'm not even joking. These things are too big to be in 40-gallon enclosures, and they need a big environment. They are very highly adapted in terms of what they eat. They eat one thing, basically, and they need it to be from this region of the Earth in the Galapagos Islands. So maybe you can get your hands on one, but it's going to be impossible for you to keep them alive. You just won't be able to do it. We're talking about in zoos in the US where we've tried to do this in the 30s and in the 60s. We've had marine biologists, like people who are trained to look after these guys or trained to at least care for them, trained to know what they need, and they can't keep them alive. So you're not going to. In fact, as far as I could tell from all the research I did, 6 years was the longest anybody outside of the Galapagos, where they are in captivity there for breeding and reproduction purposes, outside of there, 6 years is the longest we've ever kept any alive. So unless your friend's cousin's uncle lives in the Galapagos Islands and can send that sea algae, which is what they eat, back to you, there's no way that you're going to be able to feed these things, never mind give them the salt water that they need, give them the basking spots that they need, and everything in such a large scale type of environment. But I would say, if you're looking for something to research, if you just love animals that you know you'd never keep, do some research on these guys. They're maybe the most fascinating reptile that I've ever really studied at all. I just think that these guys are absolutely amazing, and we do need to study animals like this, but just like not in your backyard or your basement. No basement iguanas of this variety, please. Number 2, giant Chinese salamanders. These are alien-looking things. If I had to choose something to look scary enough to prevent invaders, like burglars, from coming in my house, I would choose this.
Never heard of a dog?
Dude, you can get past the dog. Nobody
messes with a giant salamander. I think that this would be the best. Okay, but it's not actually though, because they're just like derpy and slow moving, and they're not really great predators. They're actually really easy to catch, which is why most of them are gone. 90% of the area that they used to live in, 90% of their environment is gone due to human intervention and global warming. And most of their species is gone because, well, people like to poach them. People in parts of the world think that these are medicinal in their properties if you eat them, which they're not at all. It's like shark fin soup, same thing. It's kind of like a status thing. Look how rich I am, look how much of a jerk I am, basically, because there is no reason to eat a Chinese giant salamander at all. And yes, we use them for other things, and by we, I mean the jerks who poach them, but there is really no reason that we'd ever want to kill one of these things. And if you had one in captivity, you would probably kill it involuntarily. They are giant. When I say giant Chinese salamanders, I'm not talking like, oh, axolotls are pretty big in terms of how salamanders get. These guys will be larger than me. Now, I'm not the biggest dude in the world, but these guys can get to 5 foot 9 inches and up to 110 pounds. So yeah, I might outweigh one, but 5 foot 9. There are dudes in the NBA who are 5 foot 9. Now in captivity, the largest one in Europe anyway is 5 foot 1, and that's at the Prague Zoo, where there are 33 of these animals. But as far as I could tell when I researched for this video how many are in captivity, less than 100. And in fact, in 2008, there was only 5 in the US. So I'm sure that they've expanded since, and there are farming efforts, bred in captivity efforts around the world. But as far as zoos go, like you being able to go see one, it's really limited. It's almost impossible to find unless, I mean, well, not impossible, but very difficult. And in terms of keeping these guys in captivity in private collections, none that I know of. Now, it's not legal to, so you wouldn't be boasting about it if you had, you know, 2 brain cells to rub together, but these guys do live in free-flowing rivers. So it's very difficult, and that's why dragon snakes were on the master level list, which I pointed to earlier, link in the description if you want to watch that video, because they also need these free-flowing rivers to breed and to thrive. So for the same reason dragon snakes are master level, these guys are impossible level, because where are you going to have a free-flowing river on your property to the right temperature and humidity levels and depth with the right food supply? Like, it's next to impossible to have these guys thrive. Maybe you could keep one for a couple of weeks, but it's going to die, and you're just going to have a very expensive dead thing again. Like, all of these things, if you try to keep, are just expensive fertilizer after a few weeks.
Man.
But I mean, like, look at these things. They kind of look like, they look like dragons if dragons swam instead of fly. Swim dragons. Chinese giant salamanders kind of look like if a blobfish got, like, surgery so it could be a movie star. If a blobfish moved to Hollywood, it would be a Chinese giant salamander. That's a weird comparison. Number 1 on the list is so obvious and one of the most beautiful and majestic species on the planet, sea turtles. And today we're going to talk about one species in particular because it's the largest, leatherback sea turtles. They're the biggest of all turtles at all. These things can get to 10 feet and 2,000 pounds. Well, that's the biggest one ever recorded. They're more likely to be just over 6 feet and about 1,400 pounds. 1,400 pounds for a turtle. To put this in perspective, my 120-gallon tank that I have for 2 turtles, a Mississippi map turtle and a yellow belly slider, full weighs 1,400 pounds. So this turtle weighs more than the tank and the water in this. So how would you have one of these in an aquarium? You can't. Well, first of all, legally you can't. These are a protected species. It is highly illegal to trade them and own them in private collections. And yes, there are rehab facilities, places like Galveston, Houston, that type of area, where you see them in captivity, but they're like rehab facilities. They're for injured turtles. They're for bringing the population higher, not for you as a tourist to come see. The amount of water and just area in general you would need to keep one of these guys is ridiculous. And because these guys don't have a reverse button, like they swim forward only, they'll just bash into things. Because in the past, before we knew more, there have been places that tried to keep these in captivity, and it just never ended well. You need massive, massive, massive bodies of water to contain them. They are ocean-dwelling animals, and you can find them all over the world. Even here in Canada, where we can find next to nothing, off the coast, we can see these guys some parts of the year. Now, they're not going to lay eggs here. You'll have to go to the southern US for that, and around the world also. So if you want to see these guys, you definitely can. They're all over the place, but there's not an incredible number of them left, which is very sad. And they do swim huge distances, so it's hard to track them as well. What I'm just trying to say here is if you want to keep one in a private collection, like, you can't. You should just admire them. I mean, look how big these things are. They are absolutely amazing and the most majestic thing that I've ever seen swimming in an ocean. Absolutely beautiful. So there you go. Those are your top 5 impossible level reptiles. What do you think? Did you like this video? Should I do a part 2? There are several more impossible reptiles out there. If you want to leave a comment below letting me know what next week's video should be, that's where I get all the video ideas. I'd really appreciate it. And just before you click off the video, if you want to win some free merch from us, leave this emoji in the comment section below, hit the like button, be subscribed, and follow the Instagram channel. That's it, the Instagram account, and you're automatically entered into a draw. We're giving away 10 shirts, whatever ones you want if you win. Once we hit 100K. So 100,000 subscribers, we're not that far away. I'd really appreciate it. And a special thank you to the Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. If you want to see videos early, extra videos, if you want to know about special projects like in the room next to me that I don't talk about on this channel, and animals in this collection that I don't ever really talk about, as little as $1 a month, you can be a Patreon supporter too. And I think I plugged absolutely everything. Diamond, you were very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that. And because I do videos twice a week, that means I'll see you on Monday.